Proudly sponsored by ALA, motoring insurance rated 5 stars on Trustpilot.
Hello everybody, we now live in a world where a brand spanking new, no options Porsche 911 Carrera 2 is over £100,000. Luckily, we do still live in a world where for that money you can have something a lot more exciting. Just a few weeks ago, I featured the Ferrari F430, which for now you can still have for that money. You could also have this, the McLaren 570. It's been a long time since I've driven one of these, and today I'm back in the driver's seat for the first time in a coupe, and I'm going to find out whether, all these years later, this could be the perfect first supercar. Enjoy. It's funny, isn't it, how time and value can change your opinion of a car. When this came out, everybody wanted one. It was a seriously cool car, riding on the coattails of the 12C, 650, 675LT and the mighty P1. Here, for the first time, was a McLaren designed to be a little bit more accessible. It still wasn't 911 money, but at £150,000 base price, or £125,000 for the 540C, it did feel within spitting distance. Some very aggressive finance deals also meant you could have one of these for not a lot of money. Unfortunately, the 570 also found itself in the middle of a perfect storm. It sold, and it sold well, but because of this, when they had issues, and they did have issues, dealers were quickly overwhelmed. Customers were irritated that their brand new, beautiful car wasn't even on their driveway. What also looked to be a dream deal for many quickly turned into a nightmare as values of these plummeted, leaving many people in massive negative equity. However, when the model was finally discontinued around 2019 to 2020, it was left without a successor. That took years to properly arrive in the form of the Artura. And when it did, people I think looked back at the 570 and went, do you know what? That was actually a very good car. And it is a very, very good car. In fact, as sports cars go, it might be one of the greatest ever made. And to demonstrate that, here we have a beautiful bit of British B road, no traffic, and an MSO sports exhaust. Let's enjoy. Now, the first thing you need to know about the 570S is McLaren called it a sports car, part of their sports series. But it's not. This, by any sensible metric, is a supercar. It's low slung, it's wide, it's exotic, it's fast, it's expensive, and it's got the engine in the middle. The McLaren badge then was simply icing on a very tasty cake. For here you have many of the same ingredients that made McLaren's previous cars so good. A carbon fibre tub, here evolved with more pronounced cutouts to make getting in and out a little bit easier. Behind us, we also had the by then familiar 3.8 litre Ricardo-built twin-turbo flat-plane crank V8, derived from Nissan's racing program of the 1990s. It makes, as the name would suggest, 570 horsepower and 443 pounds-feet of torque. That's 600 newton meters. the bodywork is a combination of composite and aluminium, and here in Coupe, guys, the car weighs around 1,450 kilos. That is seriously impressive, although at the time there were those that doubted the 570. Not its ability, but more its originality. This having so much in common with the other cars, how do you tell it apart? Well, first off, the looks. This has a very different styling language too, the 12C, the 650, the 675, and even the later 720. In some ways that's not really a good thing because it does make them a little bit confusing, but every now and again I meet somebody that says every single McLaren is exactly the same, I can't tell any of them apart, and personally I think they're just lazy. I mean, that's like saying you can't tell the old and the new NSX apart. And you can tell the difference, can't you, between a Ferrari F430 and a 458? Heck, there are people out there that'll tell you the difference between a 997.1 and 997.2 911. It's the rear lights, by the way. And from some angles, I really like this. It's a sharper affair than the 12C or the 650. It's got big, pronounced cutouts in the side. The rear, I always felt, was a little bit lackluster. This one has been fitted with an MSO carbon spoiler, and from some angles, I just don't like it. But when you see it on the road going past, it does look mean. The colour, by the way, is Sicilian yellow, and I adore it. But I'm getting ahead of myself. What do these cars lack compared with the Super Series? Well, in short, there's two key things. The active chassis. You still have adaptive dampers here. Very, very good ones, in fact. But what you don't have is the cross-linked proactive chassis control of the Super Series. What this means is the ride maybe isn't quite so supernaturally good, but the trade-off is here you get even better steering feel. The other thing the cars lack, active aerodynamics. No big air brake coming up when you put your foot on the pedal. By and large, though, it was otherwise business as usual. So you have an interior here with a combination of different elements. The iris screen in the middle that just about nobody likes because it doesn't work very well. It also now controls things like your HVAC, and this one has even been upgraded to feature Android Auto and Apple CarPlay. The specification of this particular car is very nice too. So you've got the Bowers & Wilkins stereo, contrast stitch, a mixture of Alcantara and leather. You have the extended single-piece carbon fibre paddle, so you can go up or down the gears through either side. Sounds like a gimmick, but actually it's quite a handy thing to have. The overall dimensions of the car aren't that big, though interestingly it is actually marginally larger than the 12C and the 650. Inside, though, like them, it doesn't feel particularly big at all. If you were to compare it to, say, an F430, that feels much roomier inside. This, a very snug, intimate affair. You can really sense the Lotus DNA in this car, and it permeates the entire experience. And there are two areas, I think, where that really shines through. The first of which, the suspension. Either leave the car in its default mode or press the active button, which engages the two controls here, one for handling, one for powertrain, and if you do leave the handling in normal mode, you're greeted with a ride that's honestly brilliant. In its day, they compared this with the likes of a Rolls-Royce, and though that might be over-egging it a touch, it's also not a million miles from the truth.
Join me and the Friendly Faces Car Club, where the focus is always on fun and friendship through the automobile. No membership is necessary, no sign-up fees are involved, and no car is not good enough for us. We have a full calendar of motoring events, from social meets to track days, skid pan experiences, and just announced a driving tour. These are the perfect events for those who enjoy cars, want to use them responsibly, and meet new like-minded people. For information on events you can book right now, go to www.friendlyfacescarclub.com or follow the link in the description below.
One thing I also appreciate here, compared with the old 650, is they divorced the handling settings, the powertrain, and the traction control. Before, if you set the powertrain to track, your traction control was effectively disabled. And here you've got three modes: on, off, and in the middle, dynamic, which is a very important thing to press, because if you don't have it on, it does rather feel like the car is pulling its punches. From the factory, this would have been supplied with a set of Pirelli P0s. Today, it's on Michelin Pilot Sport 4S. They're good, but they're still getting a workout with this thing. And one of the major criticisms of all McLarens was always the engine, and that's for a couple of reasons. Nobody denied its effectiveness. These things are rapid, seriously rapid, but it didn't sound like the most sonorous thing, and you really had to get it working to enjoy it. And though it'd be a nice, lazy thing for me to say, oh, the old naturally aspirated engine of a Ferrari 458 is just better, not actually in love with that engine either. But the 488's turbo really showed us how things could be done. This, below 3,000 RPM, it doesn't really have all that much, but once those turbos do get spinning, it's devastating. Get it north of 4 and a bit thousand RPM, and any complaints you might have about the engine seem to melt away. The gearbox too is very entertaining, 7-speed DCT, and when you're on it, you get nice crisp shifts, both down and up. This is a gearbox as a gearbox should be. And just for science, I'm going to put the powertrain into track. I'm leaving the handling in sport. If you want to know what it's like in track, just shake your phone around a bit. Yeah, even more aggressive. The dials change too. Oh, and you get a little kick in the back, bit of a torque hit from the thing on the upshift as well when you are in track. Either way, this thing across a bit of B road is absolutely magnificent. More than that, it's a really unintimidating car to drive. This is so friendly, so easy. Visibility is generally excellent. The A-pillar's pretty chunky, but it's also quite close to you. There's a nice big gap between it and the wing mirror as well. The B-pillar, well, it doesn't really exist and it's not much to speak about, and with this you've got a bit of glass behind you too. Even the rear visibility is actually okay. When it comes to parking, you have got both sensors, front and rear, and a camera at the back too. Sadly, no matter what exhaust you put on these, they never sound quite as good as the Ferrari of the day either, but they have a distinct sound about them. And as you do build through the rev range, it changes a little, but it's never exciting. I never put my foot down in one of these just to hear it. And to be quite honest, the engine, well, it plays second fiddle to the steering, which is utterly magnificent. It's not the best in the world. That's probably a Lotus Europa twin cam, but of anything modern, this is just sensational. You are in no doubt at any point what the car is doing. It really is that good. If you want to know what good steering is, go drive a Lotus or go drive one of these. Then tell me a 992 is brilliant, because it just isn't. There are downsides to this. Here the car features a double wishbone both front and rear, and under hard braking, that back end is quite squirrely. When I did my first review of these, I mentioned that, and a lot of people complained at me. Afterwards, for the Artura, McLaren changed the design of the suspension, introducing a multi-link at the back. Funnily enough, Ferrari had done the same thing when moving from the F430 to the 458, and McLaren's reasoning? Stability under braking. Now, in normal situations, it's absolutely fine, but if you absolutely stand on the anchors, the thing does move a little bit. We also got a little bit of a chirp out of the tyres there. The ABS clearly willing to wait until the very last moment. This one is actually running slightly wider tyres than standard. By default, they're 2.25 front, 2.85 rear, wrapped around 19 and 20-inch wheels respectively. Best of all, if you've been thinking about buying a Ferrari, but you're worried about public perception, you're not going to have that issue here. Everybody loves a McLaren, from the young to the old. I once went up to Scotland in my 430 and my buddy Steve in his 570 GT. One of the old ladies who lived in the little village walked out, looked at his car and said, "That's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." Love that. But I know what you're thinking, McLaren does have a bit of a reputation. a reputation I probably helped cement many years ago. Well, there's something I want to say on that topic. I will always hold a company to account if I feel they are not providing their customers with the service they deserve. And it doesn't matter if it's McLaren, if it's Porsche, or if it's Ferrari. I think I've been very vocal about those companies in recent times and the ways in which I feel they have let their customers down. And yes, very famously, McLaren did do a horrible job in the early days, making numerous mistakes with cars and customers. I'd love to say that they've learned. I'm not really convinced that they have. However, what has changed in recent years is the fact we now have a large number of independents. So here in Britain, you have the likes of Thorney Motorsport, V Engineering, who I hear many good reports about, and have recently just developed a new battery system for the P1. There are also smaller outfits like XP1 down in Essex. Kip, this car's owner, previously had a 964 Generation 911, a car he had for nearly 20 years. This one he's had for 5, and in that time he's put 27,000 miles on the clock. And sure, there have been a couple of issues. He had to sort the paint bubbling, which seems common on all McLarens, but beyond that, it's been pretty good. He had a couple of poor experiences with McLaren authorised dealers, but now uses V Engineering and is extremely happy with them. Crucially though, this car has never failed to proceed, and if anything, I think now, with more miles and years behind them, these cars should be better than ever to own. All those little issues, all those little problems, they should have been ironed out long ago. I would always caution anybody against buying any low-volume sports car with few miles on the clock. Lotus, Lamborghini, Ferrari and McLaren, they're all the same. If you go and buy a car that's 10 years old with 2,000 miles on the clock, I'm sorry, but whatever happens is your fault. And yes, things will go wrong with these. They will be more difficult to live with than a 911. But it's also a car you'll look at every single day and go, yeah, that's mine. And so you should. The only thing I will say about the engine, at the top end, beyond about 6,500 RPM, it doesn't really fizzle out, but it just kind of plateaus. In a 12C or a 650, that is where it digs down and goes for that last lunge. There is a difference between the two. And yes, I know you can get people remap these. Honestly, I wouldn't. Just leave it alone. The brakes are mighty. Here, carbon ceramics were standard fit, though you will see 570s and 540s with the steels. Some of which from the factory, some of which have been added later. Do keep an eye if you see a car with those though, because there is a chance it's seen a lot of track work. That's not necessarily a bad thing, just something you need to be aware of. And I've never driven a 540, I'm sure it's a brilliant thing, but honestly, I just wouldn't bother. Today, these don't really command much of a premium, if any, and the 540 feels like a much cheaper car. The 570s tend to almost all have either the leather or the Alcantara pack. The 540 has the base interior. Speaking of which, by and large, this does feel like a very nice place to be in. These later cars have one big display for the driver, as opposed to the trio of the early cars, and it does feel a lot nicer. Material quality is generally fairly good, though on occasion you will find things that just don't quite line up, don't feel like they're properly put in, and are a little bit wonky. That's McLaren for you. You are just going to have to put up with these things. But trust me, it is worth it. In terms of pricing, well, these have been up and down like a yo-yo from the day they were released. Many of them weighed in at anywhere between 160 and 200,000 pounds a list. There were discounts, there were deals, but even shortly after launch, you saw them trading for a bit over 120,000 pounds. The depreciation was brutal. By the time the car had officially gone off sale in 2019, 2020, you could pick them up for sub 100,000 pounds. Then we had COVID and things went all very weird. Initially, prices fell even further, but then in 2021 and 2022, when supply of everything dried up, they went up again. And weirdly, for a long time, these have commanded more money than either a 12C or even a 650 in some cases. It's also worth pointing out that seeing a regular 570S Coupe is a fairly unusual thing. This is what they launched with, back in those days when the Coupe always came out first, followed a little while later by the Spider. But when the Spider came out, that was the one that everybody wanted. The market was flooded with 570s. McLaren, you see, being the genius they are with their carbon fibre tub, there's basically no compromise involved in getting a Spider. They even look more or less the same. However, McLaren muddied the water even further by then introducing the 570 GT. Set up to be a touch softer, by default anyway, you could re-option the 570 springs and steering to it, and it also had different styling with a side-hinged boot, the theory being it was then even more practical. Now the reality was, by the time that car came out, people either bought the GT if they wanted a coupe for touring, or they bought the Spider if they wanted something a bit more fun where the roof came down. The regular 570S Coupe was almost forgotten, as was the 540C. Just last year, I saw a whole bunch of 570s trading for well over £100,000. And there are still some at that price, but they begin now much lower. Around about £70,000, with some being in the 60s if you're brave, but there are lots of good coupes out there between £70,000 and £85,000, with the Spider starting usually at around the £80,000 mark, meaning that for 80 to 90 grand, still less than that brand new 911 and about the same as a much older Ferrari F430, you could have one of the best driving, most exciting cars out there you can think of. The Ferrari sounds better, I think the Ferrari looks better, and the Ferrari feels much nicer inside. As an experience, you might call it the better car, but as a driver, engine aside, this is better. A lot better.
If anything, the major rival for a 570 comes from within, because if you can afford one of those, here in the UK at least, you could afford either a 12C or a 650. For me, the 12C is an iconic car, and in future will be viewed, I think, as one of the firm's most significant. However, the 650 is definitely a better driving experience, and for me, if you want the full McLaren experience, you do have to get a Super Series, because that advanced suspension system really does add something to the drive, and when you've stopped having fun, it means it's an even better car still. There are lots of touches too with the Super Series that remind you they do sit a level above. However, the simple fact is, if all you want from a car is to have a lot of fun on a nice bit of road, the Sport Series is the more engaging car. They also, by virtue of not having some of the more complicated systems, are a little easier to live with. And so, I would perfectly understand anyone today who chose to go for a 570 over a 650, even if the price was the same. And as for the obvious German rival, well, it has to be something like a 911 GT3, which if you're a dedicated track fiend is still going to be the better buy. But the McLaren is a supercar. And if you don't believe me, just borrow one, take it to a petrol station and see, because the experience you get owning one of those is very, very different from any Porsche I've known this side of a Carrera GT.
I know I seem to have a reputation as the world's premier McLaren hater. Never really quite understood that one. I don't think I've ever given a single McLaren car a bad review, because they've been good cars when they work. Even the McLaren GT, I just thought was an odd car. Not a bad one, just one that nobody asked for and nobody wanted. This was different. And what frustrates me most is I think McLaren made a huge mistake by ending this car's production as soon as they did. They were so far ahead of the competition. You could argue this didn't really have a direct rival over at Ferrari. It could have gone on for quite some time, being simply facelifted, give it a bit more power, make the looks, I think, a little more cohesive, a little more coherent, fix some of the reliability issues, and carry on. There was a lot of life left in this platform. Instead, baby was thrown out with bathwater, and they made the biggest mistake possible, closing the order book and not really reopening it for Artura for years. And when it did come out, nobody was interested. And the problem was, the gulf between a 570 and a new Artura was so enormous, you were talking another £100,000 for a V6 hybrid. Well, even the customers that could looked at it and went, no, we don't really want it. And I don't doubt the Artura is a great car. I've never driven one, I've hardly seen one. If you've got one and you're happy for me to review it, I would absolutely love to. Even the 750, which I have driven, not reviewed, that's a great car too, but nobody's really buying it because McLaren just got it right first time around. Today, with the context of everything going on, this screams bargain. Stop thinking about it, do it. If you can buy a McLaren 570, get one. We're never going to see its like again, and certainly not for this money. McLaren are in the process of being reborn, but they're never ever going to build another one of these. And that's a shame. Anyway, with that being said, I want to say a huge thank you to Kip for bringing his car out, and as ever, to you for watching. Don't forget to hit the like button, comment down below, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you for the next one, which might well be a review of an MG Cyberster. Bye-bye.